Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. I do have to tell you, there are some people who find their passion late in life, and then there are some of us who have the ability and are lucky enough to get into something that they can do for, I don't know, the next 40 years or stuff and meet some of the most incredible human beings. Well, I'm going to ask him about this, but I'm not sure all of them were incredible human beings, but they sure appeared to be when they were on stage doing comedy. And so our Scott Edwards is our guest today. He has been in the comedy world and has had comedy clubs since 1980, which is 45 years ago. And I remember those days. And by the way, first of all, R. Scott, welcome to the show. How are you today, sir?
Kevin McDonald, I'm so excited to be here. And yes, I'm Scott Edwards. Woo! Settle down. Okay, sit down and back. Don't be crazy. It's not that big a deal. You have all these really great, mindful gurus on your show. I'm not sure what a goofy ass guy like me is doing here, but man, I'm so happy to be on Positive Talk Radio.
Holy crap, you must be a professional.
Well, when you've done entertainment as long as I have, you find your voice.
You do indeed. And you started out, now, for those of you that may not have been born around 1980 or 75 or something like that, you don't know that comedy clubs were not something that always existed. It was the Comedy Store and others like it, including what Scott opened up, were kind of new in the 1980s and stuff. And it was really, how did you get involved with it at such a tender age? Because that was 45 years ago.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, stand-up comedy used to be only the break between jazz bands and between strippers in the 60s and 70s. It was not a mainstream entertainment format. But into the late 70s, clubs like the Improv and the Comedy Store got a little bit of television exposure, and clubs started popping up. There were, when I opened, my club is Laughs Unlimited. All Comedy Showroom is still operating today, almost 50 years later. But when I opened it in August of 1980, it was the 12th full-time comedy club in the entire United States. And that's because stand-up comedy had been regulated to the back of the stage, and it was just coming out, emerging, as they say. And I was so lucky to catch that wave early on. And boy, I rode it through the 80s and 90s, and it was an amazing trip. I got to tell you, Kevin, we had a lot of fun.
You did, with a lot of really, really incredible people. Some are still here and some are gone. But and I'm going to bring up some names because they're near and dear to my heart, like Pat Paulson, who ran for president one time.
And right up over my shoulder is one of his albums. Pat Paulson and I became very good friends. What was interesting about owning a comedy club, Kevin, is that, of course, I was bringing in the new young comics that nobody had ever heard of, people like Jerry Seinfeld and Jay Leno and Bob Saget. Nobody knew who these people were back then. And my father, who was had a great sense of humor, I wanted to kind of connect with him. And so I brought in some of the so-called old guys that had been doing comedy since the 50s and 60s. And I had a chance to bring in Soupy Sales. And for anybody old enough, I actually had a pie thrown in my face by Soupy Sales, which was a mainstay on his early TV show in the 60s. And then Pat Paulson, who was on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, actually ran for president a couple times. I brought him in for my father, but we became great friends. I spent time in his winery and ranch in Napa, and a terrifically funny guy. And one of the classics of comedy, really, Pat Paulson, Soupy Sales. I also had a chance to bring in some other people that over the years, but it was all about connecting with this unique industry we called stand-up.
Yeah, no, at one time, Soupy Sales actually was a local celebrity here in the Seattle area.
Oh,
I
I
do
knew you were up in
believe.
Seattle. I didn't know that's where he was from.
I'm not sure if he was from here, but I do remember his show being, and also years later he was on Hollywood Squares and all of those things. And you have met, I could go down the list if you'd like, because people like Paula Poundstone and Dana Carvey and Graham Chapman, and then like Ellen DeGeneres, and it just there's so many people.
Yeah, and what's interesting, first off, Graham Chapman falls into that list of heroes in comedy. I was a big Monty Python fan, and literally months before he passed away, I had a chance to have him in my club, and he told amazing stories of hanging out with the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and other celebrities of the time, and talked about making the movies and Fawlty Towers, their TV show. So it was a great honor to have Graham Chapman in my club. But all the people you're mentioning, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, my club was an A room, but it was still a stepping stone before television. So for example, Jerry Seinfeld was working my club many times a year, and then he called up and said, "Hey, I have to cancel a week because I'm doing this TV pilot." Well, it became the Seinfeld show, pretty successful. A few people heard of it. But what's great about Jerry was he called me up and he goes, "Hey, I owe you a week." And a year later, he came back after the show was a success and worked a 4-day weekend for the same money I had booked him originally. So that was a great coup for the club. But people like Ellen DeGeneres was a featured act at my club long before her fame. Dana Carvey, Paula Poundstone kind of got their start at my club, Paula especially. But it was getting the opportunity to work with these people when they were young and hungry and still just building their foundational career, right? And it's all about who you know, right, Kevin? I mean, like on your show, you've had these great people like Danielle and Lisa, Taylor and Krista, and they get out there and they share their experience and they share their life and they give back through your podcast and their stories some sort of positive feeling towards life. Now, I am not that person. I don't really give a rat's ass about your feelings, but I will entertain you and help you forget your problems, forget your bills, kind of misdirect you, let's say, like a magician would do, for a few hours and entertain you with, magic and juggling and stand-up comedy and music, things that bring our life some joy and balance some of the crap we have in our lives, right? But
yeah,
I mean, and what's great about your podcast is that you're bringing positivity through the stories of people that have had a lot of challenges, and that really gives your audience some optimism, and I think that's so important.
By the way, the check's in the mail. I appreciate that.
Well, my point was, I just entertain people. I've had a few people say, well, what is your podcast giving back and what's it doing? And I go, nothing. It's just here for fun. I share comics material and I do interviews of people from the industry on my podcast, by the way, Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. But it is really the story about these young entertainers. Bob Saget, for example, to answer your question, Kevin, the quick story was I was selling life insurance. I was like 22 years old. When you're 22, you don't give a rat's butt about life insurance. You don't understand it. You don't think you're going to ever die. But I was a good salesman, and I was out doing the job, and I had a little vacation, and I went to LA. My dad, the humorist, said, go to this little club. It was called the Comedy Store and it was a satellite location in a little town called Westwood, which was where UCLA is.
Yep.
And I just went by with my then girlfriend, soon to be ex-wife, and saw Dave Coulier and Sandra Bernhardt and George Wallace. And I got talking to Dave Coulier, and on the drive back from LA, I decided to quit my job, go bankrupt, and start Laughs Unlimited. But as soon as I made that decision, I went back down to LA, connected with Dave Coulier. He introduced me to Bob Saget, who introduced me to Garry Shandling, who introduced me to George Wallace, who introduced me to Jerry Seinfeld, Harry Anderson. It goes on and on. And that's really how I built a really successful comedy club chain. I ended up with 3 clubs, was interacting with these entertainers, giving them a stage to hone their career on as a platform, jumping them into television and movies and whatever they did. You know, Kevin Pollak had a little bit of success in the movies, was working my clubs back in those days. And it has really been a fun, happy life. So I don't really fit your show's regular guest, but my goal was to have fun the whole time.
Well, but you see, the cool thing about, and why I really wanted to have you on the show is by the way, if you go to his website, which by the way, what is the website that you want to reference to them to?
Well, if you go to the Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network.com, which was also a free app on all Android and Apple phones, it does provide a gateway to many podcasts by stand-up comics. It's got comedy blogs, some videos from back in the day, and it's a lot of fun. And on that Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network, you'll find a couple of my podcasts. I have a short form stand-up comedy one called Comedy Appetizers, and every show's only about 5 or 6 minutes. And then my regular show, Stand-Up Comedy, or host and MC, that's really the foundation. It's 6 years long, had 500,000 downloads. It's doing pretty well. And on that show, I share stand-up comedy from the 80s and 90s, because funny is funny. May seem old, but it's still funny. But I also interview many of the people from the industry, from comics to agents to club owners, even ex-employees. So it's been a really fun ride. And Kevin, you've had so much success in your show, over 1,000 episodes, 12 million subscribers. Is that right? 12 million, 12,000?
12,000. I don't really know.
You're very successful, Kevin. You're giving positive. Talk radio is giving back, and people love it. You're so good.
Well, wow, I had no idea.
Well, wait. Let's ask the kids. Kids, what do you think? Is Kevin doing a good job?
I have to tell you, by the way, we're talking with Scott, R. Scott Edwards, and he is one of the foundations. He's one of the guys who was there at the very beginning when people said, and I'm sure you experienced this, when you opened up Laughs Unlimited, people said, "Oh no, that's not going to work. What do you? No, there are no clubs like that. What are you, crazy? You need to sell something or do something else." And one of the reasons why it's important for you to be on the show is to recognize that, no, you had a vision, and your vision turned out to be 45 years of success. You've got to meet some of the most incredible people. The Gospel According to Robin Williams is, he, and your first club was in Northern California. So I'm sure he was one of the guys that came by every now and again and said, "I need to work on some new material. Can I hang out with you?"
Robin actually already had his career going by the late 70s and early 80s. He did appear at my club twice, but it wasn't part of a paid gig. He was doing a concert nearby, and he loved the people in the industry. He loved other comics. And after one of his, 2-hour shows, he dropped into my club and would do like an hour and a half. It was crazy. Robin was one of a kind. And what a lot of people don't know, I'll share a quick story about Robin Williams, is that we all remember that machine gun style hyperkinetic guy on stage that just bam, 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 he throws out 1,000 funny things and 800 of them hit with somebody in the audience, and he just kills with an audience. But backstage, when he's not in the camera and lights, Robin Williams was very sedate, very quiet, loved just talking to people from the industry, and almost shy. It was so interesting. I know that you have some business to do. Do you have time for one quick story?
I tell you what, let me do this real quick. It's only
Okay,
30
I
seconds.
knew you had something coming up. So you sell some stuff, and I'll be waiting with a great story about the one and only Red Skelton.
Ooh, another one. One of my, the interesting thing is, and you're going to make me blow the break, but the interesting thing is, Scott, is that there are so many people that are younger that don't think about Red Skelton or
One of
or
the geniuses of comedy.
or Gracie or any of the foundational people that have built comedy the way it is. We need to take this quick break, and if you're a real estate agent, you need to pay attention to listen to this, because this gentleman has got a thing for you.
You became a real estate agent for freedom, success, and real momentum. So why are you still stuck waiting for closings to save you? I'm Ophir Adar, founder of Real Momentum, and I help agents like you become seven-figure earners. My first client that I coached, brand new agent, made $250,000 back in 2006. What's the secret? You feed your white wolf. That's the part of you that's bold and unstoppable and a closer and able to build rapport quickly. So click Get Listings at Real Momentum and let's unleash your real estate potential.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. We've got a great guest for you. R. Scott Edwards is with us. He is a comedy club owner. He has met and rubbed elbows with the greats of the industry, going all the way back to, goodness gracious, Red Skelton. Tell us that story.
Yeah, I didn't mean to leave a cliffhanger, but I had the honor of going to Red Skelton's 100th birthday, and I want to let everybody know he actually didn't make it to 100, and it was a stand-up comic named John Pate, who was one of my regulars, that invited me. But Red Skelton was also quite a painter. You may have seen his clown portrait, and I happen to own a few that have been autographed. But Red didn't think he was going to make 100. In fact, he didn't. He passed away fairly soon after the event I'm going to share with you. But I wanted to talk about the power of stand-up comedy and entertainment. And for those that are our age or older would remember that Red Skelton was a movie star, a comedian, and entertainer on early TV and before TV on radio. He had been around through all that legacy entertainment period. And I got invited to his 100th birthday, and there's, maybe 800 to 1,000 people were crammed into this hall. One of the fun things, Kevin, was that they took a picture of Red Skelton with 100 clowns, because he was really into clowns in his paintings. And I got a chance to get a picture with those 100 clowns, and it included Ronald McDonald and Bozo. But anyway, that's a side story. The story that's really interesting is that this man was near death. He had done his part for entertainment, but they wanted to give him one last salute, one last recognition. So all these people are celebrating, and they're telling stories and showing videos. And finally, they introduce Red Skelton. Well, they push out this cadaver onto the stage, and he just looked like death warmed over. He was not doing well. He was in his early 90s, and it was near his time. And they rolled him up, and a few people gave little speeches, and they were honoring him, and he didn't move. I mean, he was just in that chair like a zombie. And what was so interesting and exciting to see was then they introduced Red Skelton, and a couple people helped him up to the microphone. But here's what's interesting, Kevin: the power of entertainment and connecting with people. The minute he grabbed that mic, you would have thought he was 40 years younger. He was spry. He was like, hey, it's great to be here. You guys are amazing. And he told a couple stories and made everybody laugh. And at the end, he said, oh, it's just been such an honor to be here. And God bless, which is how he ended all of his shows. They sat him back down. You would have thought he died. And they rolled him off the stage. The important part of that story is the power of entertainment, the power of connecting people through comedy and laughter, and in my world, stand-up, is energizing. It gets the endorphins going. It gets everything important happens when you're engaging with a room full of strangers, able to communicate with them one-on-one, no screen, no internet, just you and those people. And in the case of Red Skelton, it literally brought him to life for those 5 or 6 minutes that he was sharing with the public. It was amazing to see.
And the other side of it is, I cannot imagine getting up on stage and having a bunch of people looking at you with drinks in their hands saying, okay, entertain me now. and because especially the first time you do it, you rehearse your material, you think it's really good, and then you pop into your first joke and nobody laughs. That's got to be scarier than hell.
Well, bombing is part of the process of learning. You have to write a lot. You have to be proficient at doing this art form. You have to really want it because it's not easy. If you succeed, there's a lot of travel. It's tough on relationships in your life. And there's virtually no money in the beginning. So you really have to, the starving artist thing is true. If you make it, like a lot of the people we talked about, Dana Carvey and Jerry Seinfeld and stuff, you could be very wealthy and do very well. However, they're like the 1% cream of the crop. There are literally thousands of very funny people out there that make a living doing comedy, but they're not famous. In fact, it's funny because my podcast is called Stand Up Comedy, your host and MC, where you hear stories and comedy from the famous, not so famous. Because there's a lot of really funny people that nobody's ever heard of, but they're great. I do have one other great story to share that goes back to the past. I just interviewed for the second time a gentleman that never actually worked for me, but he's somewhat famous in the stand-up comedy world, Tom Dreesen.
Oh, yeah.
Tom has been around a lot. He did over 500 TV shows. He made 60 appearances on The Tonight Show. He was a co-host and a regular on The Letterman Show. But the reason he's famous is for 15 years, he was the official opening act for Frank Sinatra.
Oh, man.
And he hung out with Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. and the Rat Pack and had so many great stories. He has a book out called Still Standing, you can find on Amazon. But Tom Dreesen is one of those guys that lived comedy entertainment. He's not really famous name recognition. I'm glad that you've heard of him. Most people haven't, but he's had a very successful career in stand-up comedy and entertainment. And just an honor to get a chance to talk to him and work with him. Isn't podcasting amazing?
It is. It is the funnest thing that I can do and still have my clothes on. I didn't say that. I really didn't say that.
Well, that is something that I think we could all be happy for.
You have no earthly idea. But it is what I love about radio per se in the large scope of things, because I was on AM radio for a long time too, is that you get to touch people that you will never meet, that you never will see them, but they will recognize. They'll say, I was listening to Scott Edwards on Positive Talk, and he was amazing. The information that he had about comedy, the people that he met, the stories that he talked about, those sorts of things will continue on indefinitely forever.
Yeah, probably outlive us, I hope.
Yeah, I hope so.
A few things to try to, just to give your audience a little bit more foundation, Kevin, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 17, a small construction company. At 24, I started the chain of comedy clubs. I went on to, don't get choked up. It wasn't that good. And, Kevin's having a little trouble with his coffee, but In the meantime, I'll just go on with my story.
Who knows that coffee is actually coffee in there? So you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
it
it's
is
5 o'clock somewhere.
it is noon somewhere. So
Anyway, I
ahead.
was just going to say, in my last company was a medium-sized insurance brokerage that I sold and used that to retire off of. But I had a lot of adventures and a lot of fun. The comedy clubs were very successful. I made a lot of money, and I was able to use that money to do crazy things. Like I owned a submarine for a few years. I had a beach shack in Hawaii for 5 years. I opened up several restaurants, a jazz club, a couple art galleries, because I'm really into art. And I had a lot of fun in my life. And it was all based on the success through these companies. And in the case of stand-up comedy, I caught that wave in 1980. And I wanted to share with your audience that, as Kevin said, there was no comedy clubs, or just a couple before 1980, but there was a lot of discos, if you remember. Yeah, remember disco, that music where the things came on the plastic round disc?
Yeah, of course. And it was, and discos were the thing.
Oh,
And
hey, I actually had a portable disco company for a couple of years. I used to spin records and I did radio. But the reason I bring it up is that in 1980, I was the 12th club in the country. There was an explosion of comedy entertainment. And by 1985, all those thousands of discotheques became comedy clubs. It was almost like Starbucks. You could find a comedy club in every city all of a sudden, right? It got on TV with Evening at the Improv and Live at the Comedy Store and stuff like that. And comedy really exploded. And I was just so lucky and blessed by God that I got a chance to ride that wave. And it, as you said, it meant meeting lots of interesting people, helping a lot of people's careers get started. But also, I did those adventurous things. I produced 3 TV series. I did several large concerts, a couple with Jay Leno, a couple with Yakov Smirnoff, if you remember the famous Russian comic. It's been a really good ride.
I got to tell you, Scott, I've interviewed, I don't know, north of 2,500 people, and I've never met anybody who actually owned a submarine. Was it a full size, or was it a 2-man?
Yeah.
What was it?
It held 45 people. It was a tourist submarine. I launched it in Monterey, California, but it failed. I lost my ass financially. It was a lot of fun. I got to drive it, not with people in it. You have to have a license for that. But it was a way for people to explore the pelagic fish and the sea otters and the kelp forest in Monterey. But here was the downside, Kevin. It's a cold water environment. And so we had a problem with algae growth on the windows. We had to actually pay a scuba diver to go with the submarine and keep the windows clean. It was really, we failed. But there was about 6 of those built. They're all around the world in warm water areas. We ended up selling mine to the Wrigley Gum family, and it's still operating out of Catalina Island, which is off of LA, warm water. But it was an adventure. And I think that much like the gurus you've had on the show, like Taylor, we take his past life and turn it into something and give back through his difficult times, finding the positive, thus Positive Talk Radio,
Yes,
and
indeed.
sharing that with the public. And for me, it was these entrepreneurial adventures, these various chapters of my life that really filled my journey.
Well, and by the way, we're talking with R. Scott Edwards, and you can go, if you just type in R. Scott Edwards, he'll show up everywhere. But if you want to go to the website again is
Stand-up comedy podcastnetwork.com, a free app on all Android and Apple phones. But there's a podcast, a couple different podcasts I do, and I produce podcasts for other people. But Kevin, you have time for one new thing?
I do, real quickly.
We do, because you do video. I never did video. My podcasts are audio only, been doing it for 6 years. But in March, just a few months ago, I launched the Tag Team Talent Podcast. That's Tag Team Talent Podcast, where I showcased short videos from around the world, mostly comedy, but there's other singers and dancers and other things. And it's a 15-minute video podcast on YouTube and Spotify. It's brand new. If you get a chance, check it out. And that's going to kind of be my future. I think I have to go with the rest of the world and go video like you.
it is remarkable when you do that, and congratulations on that, by the way.
Oh, well,
And
thank you. Very good, very important. Thank you.
And we need to take a quick break. And when we come back from our halftime break, I want to delve into, okay, you're 17 years old. You're just graduating from high school. You don't know what in the world you're going to do with yourself. And then suddenly all this magical stuff happens and lands in your lap. How did all of this happen from when you were 17 onward? Because that can be very instructive for folks at any age, because you can be any age and decide that you're going to follow your passion and live your dreams. So we'll return in just a second with our Scott Edwards. Don't go away.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald and our guest. And he could actually be a host. He could actually do a better. Have you those things that run through your mind? Oh, he's good. He could be better than me. He could take my job. He could take my whole thing.
Bringing positivity to the world. Nobody could do that.
Well, I'm hopeful, but I got to ask you because, at 17, did you have this desire? Did you grow up saying, did you have a paper route and then sell candy on the street corner? Were you always an entrepreneur? Did you think, I don't like work? Or did somebody tell you, like they told me, you're not a very good employee, so I needed to do this because I'm not a very good employee? Were you, what motivated you?
Well, to give a little bit more deep into the story, much like Krista and Lisa that you had and Danielle on your show, everybody has a tough time in their life. And I think that helps us build up calluses towards whatever comes ahead. If you're strong and go through some challenges when you're young, you can take two paths. You can end up homeless and on drugs and go the bad way. But many of us persevere and get through it and take those challenges and the downside and turn it into something. In my case, my folks divorced at 10. I was the eldest. I had two siblings. And as you just alluded to, I was mowing lawns. I was babysitting. I was doing newspaper routes. And I lived in Fremont, California at the time when I was delivering the San Francisco Chronicle. I'm telling you, the Sunday paper was, 20 pounds. But, it was all a necessity. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't fun. It was in order to help my mom survive and bring food on the table and stuff like that. So I had to work from an early age. And much as you alluded to, the reason I started opening my own companies is, well, I don't want to be shy about it, but I've been fired from every job I've ever had. I always thought I could do a better job than the boss. And for some reason, the boss didn't want to hear that from a 16-year-old kid. But what I learned early on, and this is a little tip for any future entrepreneurs out there, there's no reason to recreate the wheel. If you see something that interests you, you hear something that you think might put food on the table, Sometimes you just have to have that leap of faith and go for it. In my case, I was literally the night manager of a small sleazy motel. I was, mopping floors, cleaning toilets, and, fixing people's TVs. And I was 16 at the time, so early 17. And I was hiding from the boss in the bar. And I was supposed to, I'm sure, be doing something important, but it was late at night. And there's these two guys sitting at the bar talking. And I just overheard one of them say he was making good money as a side hustle. He was painting lines in a parking lot. And I thought, God, he's making money. I could do that. And though I really didn't have any experience, I knew enough to do my research. So I went to the Yellow Pages, which is the way you'd find people back in those days, and found the largest striping company. And I went and introduced myself to the owner and just started asking him questions. And people are proud of what they do. And I was a 17-year-old kid. He had no sense of threat. And he told me where to buy the paint, where to get the equipment, how much he charged, what striping a parking lot was all about. And I just listened. I asked the right questions and then shut up and listened. And went and I said, okay, I'm going to start my own company. Oh, crap. I don't have any money. Well, a buddy of mine had just gotten a $500 inheritance. So I convinced him, let's take that $500 and buy this paint machine. And we're like, okay, great. We're going to start our company. Neither one of us had any interest in going to college. College is for smart people. We weren't. But we couldn't. This is how smart we were. We bought the equipment. We had the paint. We had no way to get to gigs, to shows. I'm sorry, not shows, but, workplaces. And so we went to a third high school buddy that happened to own a van. And I said, hey, you want to be in this company? So the three of us started A&A Restripe. And Kevin, here's your first quiz. Why was it called A&A Restripe?
Well, your name's Scott Edwards, so it ain't that. A&A, I don't have any idea.
Because back then, the only way to market was in the Yellow Pages. And
That's
if you were
right.
A&A, you were first on the list, or AAA, or a lot of companies are called AAA or Acme or this. It was to get early in the Yellow Pages. So we started A&A Restripe. I was the salesman. Surprise! And we went out and striped lines in parking lots. And we were very successful. We did every McDonald's in Northern California. And I could work a deal like you wouldn't believe, Kevin. Not only did we get paid $1 per line, which was the going rate at the time, to paint these parking lots, I negotiated free food at every McDonald's that we striped. And I'm telling you, when you're 17 and starving, free McDonald's, whoop, whoop, we were doing so well.
Oh, absolutely. And so your gifts, if you will, because you are a very good salesman and you had your own insurance company and stuff. I want to share with our audience, because there are a lot of people that are scared of what they call cold calling. When you walk into a place and they say, who are you? Why are you here? Leave me alone. I'm busy and stuff. And that's kind of a nightmare for people. How did you get past that? Because that can be very instructive for folks.
Well, it is one of the hardest parts of sales is cold calling. And whether you're 17 or even when I had my insurance brokerage in my 50s and 60s, it was still intimidating to walk into a business cold, try to get past the gatekeeper and get a chance to talk with the actual business owner or decision maker, which is always the path to sales, right? You have to get to the people that make the decision. And everybody struggles with it. It's very difficult. A lot of it is you have to have an ego. A lot of it is you have to be kind of brave and take the risk. But also there's pushing from behind the fact that if you don't do it, you may not have food on the table. So there is some incentive to do this. But kind of a funny side story, Kevin, is I was young. This was after the striping company and after the disco and before the comedy, if anyone's keeping track of the chapters. I was selling life insurance, which I alluded to earlier, for a company called Combined Insurance out of Chicago. Now, Combined Insurance sold these amazing policies of either $1,000, $2,500, or $5,000. And if you fell out of a plane and landed in a certain pine tree on a Tuesday, they paid. They were really good. And Combined Insurance put me through an immersive sales training. I mean, it was literally brainwashing, Kevin, when I was just 19. And that brainwashing was that when you see a sign that says no solicitors, that means please come in. Or no salespeople, that means just you, right? It was literally brainwashing to the point where Combined Insurance, I was a cold calling business to business, selling these small policies to small business owners that couldn't afford, real $100,000 life policies, but they needed something to insure their family or their business for a few grand. And you sold the policy right there on the counter and accepted the payment, which is usually $25, $50. It was really, you had to do literally hundreds of these, and you were out in the street every day, all day, business to business. And even though I hated it, and even though I would never do it again, it was amazing training, because you understand that a lot of it is being shy or that fear that someone's going to judge you. And none of that matters. If you got to put food on the table and you have to make a sale, if you don't talk to people, it's not going to happen. So you got to bridge that and get to that point as soon as many times as you can.
And repetition is the key. You got to be able to go out there and learn how to do it, and learn how to be effective at it, because you don't want to look nervous. You don't want to look scared. You don't want to look like you don't belong there. Please, sir, may I have some more? You don't want any of that.
Great reference, Oliver. Hey, so Kevin's absolutely correct. It forces you to look the part, act the part, and you have to have confidence. Even if inside you're scared to death, you have to have the confidence to go in and make yourself known and make your appearance have some value. And in sales, and I did a lot of different things, sold everything under the roof. There was even a time I was a door-to-door vacuum salesman or a roof salesman. I mean, I got fired from every job possible, but it was, you have to bring something to that customer and have value to it. So even in comedy, you are selling entertainment. You have to not only get the people's butts in the seats, but then you have to produce. You have to give them something of value for their money in any kind of sales, whether it's insurance, cars, vacations. I used to have a travel agency, restaurants, it's food. You not only have to get them in, but then you have to provide the customer service and the product that they want and need.
You are remarkable that you've done so many things. Did you ever look back on yourself and say, holy crap, I've done a lot of stuff. I'm pretty successful.
Well, like any entrepreneur, there's ups and downs. I've been fairly wealthy a few times. I've been bankrupt a couple times. There was a lot of tough years. There was a lot of good years. And I think that's like many of the people that listen to your show and come on your show. It's the ability to write out the low times, knowing there's going to be the good times.
Exactly. And by the way, we're talking with R. Scott Edwards, and he has been in the entertainment business of producing. He's produced 3 different shows. He's produced lots and lots of top talent on the stage and stuff. When we come back from this real quick break, I want to delve into that, because now you're opening that up, as from what I understand, to helping people who say, I want to be a stand-up comic. You're helping them figure out how to do it. And I'm curious to know if you've ever said, no, you're just not very funny. I'm sorry. And have you thought about maybe going and selling vacuums for a living? So we need to take this real quick break in 30 seconds. Don't anybody go away. R. Scott is going to come back, and he's going to tell us how to become a Jerry Seinfeld or somebody like that. We'll be right back.
When the game is on the line, championship teams know the game plan. They communicate and work together to win. We all need a game plan to protect ourselves online. Talk to family and friends so they know how to stay safe too. Create strong passwords, turn on multi-factor authentication, update software, and recognize and report phishing, because online safety is not something you want to fumble. Get more game-winning tips at CISA.gov/secure our world. Then share them with family and friends.
Now, that's the kind of song that you might hear in a 1978 disco or something like that. R. Scott Edwards is our guest, and he's been producing comics and helping them get on stage and figure out how to make it work for them for a very long time. And
How old is what he's saying?
Well, no, you're more experienced. But you've also got the background, and you've worked with people and like Robin Williams and Zarkov Smirnoff, and I loved him. And Paul Reiser is another one, and in Seinfeld, and so many others. And but you're also helping people who are looking and saying, I'm exciting, I'm young, I can be a stand-up comic, and I want to do that. And you help them with that, don't you?
Yeah, as a club owner, I mean, one of your main jobs in helping people get into the career and finding out whether they can do it or not do it is giving them a platform, a stage, basically, to present themselves. But also, as a producer, it was my job to help build some of that ability. And that was allowing people to have stage time. And then when they were done, critique them, hey, you might want to do this, you want to try that. There were times I said, you know what, you just don't have it. But normally you try to be positive, talk radio, and help people find their funny and find their comedy lens and realize what makes them unique and what they can really bring to an audience. A couple examples back in the day, a guy that was just getting started, Carlos Alazraqui. He is a very talented comic and actor now, but he started off as a opening act and kind of open mic kind of guy at my club, and we helped him develop. His big claim to fame back in the 80s was he was the voice of the Taco Bell dog, Yo quiero Taco Bell. And but he went on to star in Reno 911, the TV show, and then there's been a couple movies. He's done a lot of cartoon characters for movies and TV. Very successful guy. Most people don't know the name Carlos Alazraqui, but if you want to learn, Google him and you'll see how much he's done. But he actually, got started at my club. Another one from the TV show Big Bang Theory, Brian Posehn, who was the geologist on that show, was an open micer. And I remember sitting with his mom in the club, and Brian would go up and do his, first 5 or 10 minutes. And his mom would just cringe because he would drop a couple F-bombs, and I'd just try to calm her down. But Brian was just getting started, and I gave him some tips. It is just like we said in life, you have to try things. And to get good at things, you have to do it over and over again. Kevin, you made that very clear. In comedy, that's never more true. You have to get on stage as much as you can, because each and every stage experience is new and different. Why? Because the audience changes every night. So your material may do well, it may not do well, right? You have to really work it through and succeed. You have to do it over and over again. And as far as producing, I'm still doing shows today. I just did a fundraiser a few weeks back with Dennis Blair, another name probably nobody knows, but he's a very talented comic musician who toured and opened up for George Carlin for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
Very, very talented guy. Some great stories. Very, very funny. And so there's a lot of people that are really funny, a lot of people that have entertained and given everybody out there that has a tough life a little break, and through comedy. But it has really been great to be involved in helping people. I have written a couple books. My first one was called Be a Stand-Up Comic or Just Look Like One. Available on Amazon. And the other is 20 Questions Answered About Being a Stand-Up Comic, also on Amazon. Those two books help people get started. There's actually a little comedy course on my stand-up comedy podcast network if people are interested. That's very affordable. But the books help. The books kind of give you an outline, a track to take. But really, much like other industries, if you don't do it, you don't learn. Like in sales, like in comedy, you just got to keep going at it, persevere, be consistent, be persistent, and you'll succeed.
Well, and speaking of succeeding, you had a couple of guys that I'm going to try and imitate one, and you tell me if you can guess who it is. Shall we try this? I'm scared now.
It's your show.
Okay.
I can't say no.
Hey, we can go have a joint, and we can go talk, and we can go have fun. What do you think, Cheech? What do you think? Should we go do that?
Oh, wow. That was Cheech and Chong. Tommy Chong worked my club a couple times. Yes, they smoked a little pot. And now they're in the business of marijuana products like gummy bears and stuff.
That
They
makes
haven't
so
given
much
up.
sense.
But no, Cheech and Chong were, again, a real big part of our growing up in the 70s and 80s of comedy, all their movies, all their TV appearances. Very funny couple of guys. Were definitely, their hook was marijuana back in the day. They're still making some money off it. But Tommy Chong was an amazing entertainer and came on my stage with his guitar and his amplifier. Remember the song? Dun, 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 dun. I mean, go get the album, people. Big Bamboo is the album. I have an autographed copy from Tommy. But Big Bamboo had some amazing, funny stuff. And Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong were amazing. So great. I knew who it was, Kevin. Good job on Positive Talk Radio.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I've always thought. Now, help me here. Because my kind of comedy, there are some people that say that I'm funny. I don't know. But my kind of comedy is kind of like an impromptu kind of thing. I don't script anything and I don't do it ahead of time. But some of these guys that get on stage and they know chapter and verse each story that they're going to tell, and they put the inflections in the right place. That's really a talent all by itself, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people don't realize that when a comic's on stage, it sounds new and fresh and they're doing it just for them. The reality is they've probably done that joke 1,000 times and tried moving the words around and did different inflections, and they find the best, what I call lump of coal, and make it into a diamond of a joke or a bit. And it's interesting because when they go on stage and make it sound new and fresh, that's kind of part of why comics go into acting, because you have to present it like, oh, I was on my way here in the car and this happened. Well, that probably happened 3 years ago, but
what's his name? The guy that would always go, and I don't know what to say. And I'm don't.
Peter Falk.
Yes.
And one more thing. Kevin Pollak did a great Peter Falk. Go Google Kevin Pollak and Peter Falk. You'll see a great impression. But in much like the other people that you have on your show, when you're trying to find the positive side of life, it's not something that's necessarily going to come to you. You have to go and get it. You have to work for it. And we were just talking about how comics and salespeople, you have to do it over and over. And the repetition is part of the process, part of the learning, part of the training that you need to succeed. And it doesn't matter if you're a comic or an insurance salesman or a car mechanic or whatever you're doing. You have to really care about it, want to do it, and work at it. And it's not always going to be easy.
There are, and I got to ask you this because, Seinfeld and Ellen and so many others, they achieved fame on the clubs on stage, and but then they got into TV, or they got to go to the Johnny Carson show at the time, which is now the Jay Leno show, I think. Or no, is it Jay Leno?
There's been 2 other people since then.
Yeah.
Kevin, don't worry about it. It's late.
And but I just lost my train of thought. That's what I was trying to say. That happens when you get to be my age. But
well, what you're saying is what happens to a comic when they end up on
Oh yeah.
TV or a
Oh, and
movie.
their material. Do they have to come? Because now their material that they have been maybe using for 18 months on different clubs, now it's nationally known, and they have to keep coming up with new material. That's got to be frustrating.
Well, yeah, it is true that when a comic goes on TV and does a set, you don't want to really repeat that, although a lot of audiences like to hear it live on stage, even though they've seen it on TV. But in an entertainer's world, you've kind of killed that material, and that's why you have to keep writing and have something for the next TV appearance. In fact, on the Carson show, they always made sure you had at least 2 sets of clean 3 minutes of clean material, because if you did well the first time and Johnny wanted you back, they had to make sure that you could do a second clean set. Not everybody can do that. But it is all about the what you learn over the years of being on stage as a comic. And to answer your question, they're doing new material, fresh material. But when they get into acting, what's interesting is that takes some of the pressure off, because they're not writing the material. They're reading a script in some cases. Right? If they're doing a TV show or a movie, they're reading somebody else's words, performing somebody else's words, and that pressure of being a writer is off. However, if they're doing the Tonight Show or they're doing an HBO special and it's just them, then they have to have the material to fill that time. But one of the best examples, Kevin, if you don't mind me sharing, out of New York is a small show called, you may have heard of it, called Saturday Night Live.
I've heard of it. Yes.
Yes. Well, a lot of comics worked hard to get onto that show. And as a matter of fact, in 1983, I think it was, I was sitting in a hot tub with Dana Carvey, and he had just gotten a phone call from Lorne Michaels saying, can you be in New York on Monday? We want to showcase you for Saturday Night Live. And for those people that don't know, Dana Carvey was one of the hit acts, the church lady and other acts on Saturday Night Live back in those days. And it really boosted his career, and he became famous, ended up doing a couple movies, blah, blah, blah. But what was interesting about Saturday Night Live is all these comics, who are all basically writers of their own material, get on the show. And I don't know if you knew this, but there's a pool of 15 or 20 writers on every Saturday Night Live show, and they have to fight to get their material onto the show, because out of 50 skits, maybe 5 make it on the show. So these comics not only had to contribute to other people's material to make a skit work on Saturday Night Live, but they were always fighting to get their material, their skit, their character, like the church lady, onto the show. It's one of the reasons Saturday Night Live has been so successful, because all that fighting to get strong material on the show made it good, because only the best out of those 50, only 5 made it on the show.
And that's with all the writers and stuff, and everybody's got an ego attached to it, but you've got your own stuff. The interesting thing, Scott, is that there are some comedy routines that are timeless, and like Who's on First would be one. And another one that it was out there with the comedy tour that Jeff Foxworthy did was, and he has to still do this today because it was so popular. It's kind of like the greatest hits thing. I was thrown out of a bar in New York City.
Well, all entertainment is that balance of, for your own personal growth, you want to keep writing, you want to try new stuff, you want to reach new heights in your writing and your performing. However, once you're successful, it's much like a rock band or any musician, that if you have a hit and people come to see you, they just assume you're going to do that hit, right? They want to hear the golden oldies, but you're there to grow, and so you slip in some new material to try it out. It is really finding that balance, right? You have to please the current fans, but you want to create new fans.
Yeah, Paul McCartney ran into that, and I know a lot of the famous musicians did as well. We've run out of time, young man. I hate to say this. R. Scott Edwards has been our guest. Go to his website, which reference it again, sir.
So you go to standupcomedypodcastnetwork.com, or if you like comedy, go to the podcast Stand Up Comedy, your host and MC.
Do you do voiceovers as well?
I'd like to, but I don't, it's a tough world to get into. They're very cliquey. And I have a friend that's a professional voiceover artist, and we've talked about it, but it's a hard part of show business to get into. But for those that do have talent, if you go to tagteamtalentsearch.com, tagteamtalentsearch.com, it'll show you an opportunity to share your 3-minute video with the world.
That's awesome. Say that again.
Tagteamtalentsearch.com is the website where we collect videos and then put them in the new video podcast and put them out to the world.
And if you are inherently a funny guy, if you or you think you're funny, or your family and friends tell you you're funny just to shut you up, this would be a great place for you to go. And again, that is Tag Team what?
Talentsearch.com. Tagteamtalentsearch.com.
And R. Scott Edwards has been our guest. I can only beg, will you come back again?
Anytime, Kevin. You're a great host. I hope I didn't share too much. But ladies and gentlemen, be sure to continue listening to Positive Talk Radio.
Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got. That's